The keyhole of death. No, door number 20. That night, the rain was drizzling like a whisper from another world. A lost traveler in the remote hills, tired and sleepy, stopped in front of an old motel by the highway, a place that should not be present after midnight. The sign THAO Lamb Hotel was dimly lit. The light was worn out as if this place had forgotten to live. Inside, the reception desk was covered in a thin layer of dust, and the night watchman was an old woman with a face like a melting wax statue. The smile did not reach the eyes. The voice seemed to be torn from a dry throat. Take room 28. And remember, if you pass room number 20, do not look. Do not stop. Even if someone calls your name from inside, you must continue, without waiting for anyone's approval. The old woman placed the key on the counter, turned away and walked into the darkness behind. The voice seemed to have never appeared, leaving only the ticking sound of the wall clock that had stopped counting time. The visitor walked into the long, dark hallway. It was damp. The yellow light was only enough to illuminate half a step. On the walls, the old paintings were stained. The figures in the paintings gradually faded, as if they were disappearing. Room number 20 was in the middle of the hallway, right before a turn. The wooden door was peeling. The lock was as big as an ancient shackle. And right in the middle of that lock was a round hole, as if someone had scratched it with their bare hands to look inside. As soon as he passed, the visitor heard a soft laugh of a child, thin as a breath, but very close. Laughing, then sobbing. Laughing, then choking. Even though his heart started to beat rapidly, curiosity still won. He bent down to look inside. A little girl was sitting in the middle of the wooden floor. Pale blue light enveloped her small body. Her long hair covered her face. Her white dress was torn as if it had just come out of the ground. She was lulling herself to a wordless song, swaying like a puppet without strings. And then, suddenly, she stopped. No one told her, but he understood. She knew she was being watched. Her head slowly tilted to one side. Her hair still covered her face. And at that moment, a cold air pierced his heart as if someone was breathing down the back of his neck. He jumped back, his heart almost jumping out his chest, then hurriedly walked back to room 28. That night, the rain was still falling, but in the room, soft footsteps echoed near the window. The wind was not strong enough to shake the door, but the latch still rattled. In the dream, the little girl stood in bed, her arms hanging down, her hair covering her face, whispering in an indistinct language. Only 3 disjointed words could be heard. "Open the door, go." When he woke up, he was drenched in cold sweat. The clock read exactly 3 a.m. The next morning, the sky was still ashen. Before leaving, for some reason, he stopped in front of room number 20 once more. He looked through the keyhole again. This time, there was no one in the room. There was only a line of words engraved on the floor, carved with his fingernails. "Don't leave me alone again." I left the THAO Lamb Hotel that same gloomy morning, my mind reeling from the story I had just heard. It felt like something was refusing to let go, following me from behind the door of room number 20. In the car, I didn't turn on the music like usual. The air in the car was thick and musty, even though the windows were down. The rear view mirror blurred with each drop of rain, but the image of the second floor window was still clear in my mind, where the small white shadow stood waving as if waiting for me to return. 2 days later, I began to experience strange phenomena. The TV in my room turned on by itself at 3 a.m. The screen was all white spots and static, like someone was trying to say something through static. When I reached to turn it off, the screen flashed a single frame. The rag doll head tilted, eyes sunken, sitting exactly in the middle of the floor, but not in a hotel, right in my living room. I almost threw away the remote. Another time, I walked into the bathroom and saw the words written in red liquid on the mirror. "Don't leave me alone." I lived alone. No one could have written that. And the mirror was clean when I walked in. Every night after that, I woke up at 3 a.m. exactly, as if there was a clock in my head controlled from the outside. It was always the same feeling. Someone standing at the end of the bed, not breathing, not moving, just looking. I started to be afraid to turn off the light when I went to sleep. But then one night, The ceiling light bulb went off with a pop. The room was pitch black, and in the moment the light went out, I saw a small face peeking out from the crack in the bedroom door, eyes glowing red, blood flowing from the corner of the mouth. Just like the receptionist had said. I went to the doctor. They said I had stress-induced sleep disorder. I went to the temple, asked for a talisman, but the talisman disappeared after a night of sticking it on the bedroom door. A week later, I was in a minor car accident. No one was hurt, but what made me shiver was that the broken glass stuck in the passenger seat looked like a small door with a keyhole. That night, I packed my things and went to my friend's house to sleep. The room my friend had prepared was a living room, simple and quiet. But when I laid down and turned to face the sofa opposite, I stopped. There was an old rag doll sitting there. I had never seen it in my friend's house before. I stood up, trembling, and reached out to touch him. And then I heard, not with my ears, but with my own spine, a chuckle close to my ear. You looked in. I don't remember exactly when I fell asleep again. The days that followed passed like a heavy fog. My mother and I went back to our hometown to mourn. The funeral was quiet, as if everyone avoided mentioning my father's death, sudden, without a last word, without an underlying illness. But I couldn't forget. I couldn't escape that blank stare in my dream. He looked at me, and I stood there, watching, doing nothing. After the funeral, I returned to the city. The apartment was the same, but it was no longer a home. Everything was wrong. The bathroom mirror was foggy every morning. Even though I didn't turn on the hot water, on that opaque layer, there were always 2 tiny handprints, as if pressed from inside the mirror. I wiped them off, but the next day they were there again. The TV turned on at 3 o'clock in the morning, but there was no more image of the doll. Just a black screen, reflecting my face, and behind me a short, long-haired figure, standing still as a statue. I didn't dare turn around. I started looking for information about the Tao Lam Hotel, about the girl who was left behind, about the family who died in that room. But all my efforts were in vain. Not a single news item, not a single archive, as if it had never existed. I turned back to the old road, where I had stopped my car that rainy night. But there was only an empty lot, overgrown with grass, without any trace of any construction. No hotel, no sign, no Tao Lam, only a dry well, covered with moss, in the middle of the lot. I moved closer, looked down, and was shocked to see the rag doll lying at the bottom of the well, head tilted, eyes black and empty, small hand still reaching up, as if waiting for someone to grab it. I ran away from there, breathing heavily as if a rock was pressing on my chest. 3 weeks later, I went to see a spiritual researcher, an old hermit living in the suburbs. I had only mentioned the part about looking to the keyhole, and he was speechless, then said, "You shouldn't look, because the keyhole is not for the living. That room is not to imprison the girl, but to imprison what is inside her." I shuddered. Every look you give is a door that opens. You don't just open that door, you're already connected to it. I asked if there was any way to end it. He just shook his head, his eyes distant. Someone who tried disappeared without a trace. Some who lived, but were no longer conscious. They kept saying the same thing. I asked, "What?" He looked at me for a long time, then sighed. I looked. I'm not allowed to turn away. And that's when I understood everything was no longer a nightmare. I had been chosen. As I approached the stage, the crying stopped. The space suddenly became eerily quiet. It was as if the sound had just been an illusion, but I knew it was real. I walked up the 3 rickety wooden steps of the stage. It was dark inside. The light from the hallway behind was only flickering as if it was about to go out. I could hear my heart beating clearly, thumping heavy, as if it were echoing in someone else's chest. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw something huddled in the corner of the stage. Small, white. I bent down. A rag doll, its head tilted to one side, its eyes 2 empty black holes. The same doll, unmistakable. Before I could touch it, something brushed past me, fast as a cold wind, the pungent smell of old blood. I turned around. No one, But when I bent down again, the doll was gone. I returned to class in a state of confusion. The girl who had seen the girl in the gym had not yet calmed down and had been sent home early. When I asked her quietly what she had seen, she shook her head, tears welling up, and could only mumble one sentence. It looked at me, but its eyes were not those of a living person. That night, I had a high fever. Lying on the bed, I fell into a deep sleep. In my dream, I saw room number 20 again, this time flooded, the walls buckling as if breathing. I stood in the middle of the room, knee-deep in water, cold and murky. In the corner of the room, there was an old wardrobe. The door slowly opened. A little girl stepped out. Her long hair still covered her face. Her white dress was soaked as if it had just been fished out of the bottom of a pond. But this time, I saw her face clearly. There was nothing. Her face was blank. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just a layer of pale skin stretched tight, like a mask. And then there was a tearing sound. The skin on her face began to crack. From the crack, black blood flowed in streams. A mouth slowly emerged. No lips, no teeth, just a black hole. From it, she whispered, "You looked in, so you had to keep my eyes." I screamed and woke up, cold sweat running down my back. But when I wiped my face and looked in the mirror in my room, I couldn't see my eyes, just two empty sockets. My name is Dren, and I used to think sleep paralysis was just a normal physiological thing, until I realized not all sleep paralysis is random. The first time I had it, I was in 8th grade. One hot summer night, I slept facing the wall, the fan running at full speed. I woke up in the middle of the night, unable to open my eyes, unable to move. I felt something sitting on my chest, heavy, like a person. I couldn't see a face, but I could hear breathing, rapid, hush, like a woman trying to cry without making a sound. And then, the familiar cracking sound in my ears. Neck bone, cracking. I woke up, unable to scream, heart pounding like crazy, pajamas stuck to my skin with sweat. I told myself it was fatigue, but a few weeks later, it happened again, and every time, that breathing sound, that cracking sound. When I was in high school, I started to record my sleep paralysis experiences, record them, compare them, look for patterns. And then I discovered they always happen on rainy nights, and always at 3:10 in the morning. I also realized something even more horrifying. Every time I had sleep paralysis, I heard a child's voice. Sometimes it was a sobbing sound under the bed. Sometimes it was a light scratching sound on the wooden floor, steady, slow, and once I heard a whisper right next to my ear. "Mom and Dad don't recognize me. You'll help me, right?" I never dared to answer. When I was 17, I went to boarding school. I thought that being away from home, escaping that apartment full of memories, would bring me peace. But the first time I slept in a dorm, I dreamed of a wall. On the wall, there was a small crack. I went closer. From inside, I heard the sound of a baby crying. With each step I took, the sound grew louder and more suffocating. I touched the crack, and the wall began to crumble like wet mud, revealing an old wardrobe inside. The door swung open. A small arm poked out, pale, shriveled, still with its bloody umbilical cord. I screamed. I woke in the middle of the night. I found my fingernails bleeding from scratching my skin without realizing it. I knew it all came back to where it started. Room 20, the keyhole, the doll, the abandoned child, the girl who broke her child's neck, the man in my dreams, the cracking sound. I no longer thought this was a coincidence. This was a loop, and I had become the bearer of surrogate memories for the unnamed souls. I began to write down every detail, not to survive, but to remind myself, because I knew someone would look in the keyhole. And next time, there might not be anyone to turn on the light in time. Slowly, each footstep seemed to deliberately hit the cold tile floor, echoing steadily in the night. I lay still, my heart pounding in my chest as if it were about to burst, but my body was still unable to move. The footsteps stopped, right next to my bed. I could clearly feel someone standing at the edge of the bed. The coldness seeped into every bone. The faint smell of wet mud and old blood wafted up. My throat was dry. Tears welled up uncontrollably. And then I heard breathing, very faint, but close enough that I could feel the heat on my face. The breath of a child, with a tiny whisper, like the wind blowing past my ears. Wake up and play with me. I tried not to scream, not to breathe hard, not to open my eyes. But my whole body was shaking. The footsteps sounded again, this time retreating to the end of the bed. I thought it was over, until my bed sank. Clearly, bit by bit, like something heavy was crawling up from the foot of the bed. I could feel it, pressing down on my legs, then my knees, then my stomach, a weight like a rock pressing against my chest. The musty smell was getting stronger. I tried to open my mouth, hissing in broken syllables. Don't. And then a cold hand touched my neck, not squeezing, just placing it lightly. But the hand was very small, like a child's, and the fingers were abnormally long, as if stretched. The next second, I clearly felt it, a face press against mine. The hair fell down, touching my cheek. My eyes were still closed, but I knew it was looking straight at me. A choked sob rang out. I'm cold. I'm hungry. Then, like a knife cutting through space, a cracking sound rang out. A sound I would never forget. The sound of someone's neck being broken. I screamed, jumping up as if waking up from a dream. The light was still off. The room was still silent. But the blanket I was covering myself with had fallen to the floor a long time ago. I shakily got out of bed, quietly turned on the light. The pale yellow light emitted, not illuminating much. I bent down to pick up the blanket, and my heart stopped. There was a small handprint on the edge of the blanket, covered in mud and blood. I froze. Even though I was awake, even though I had escaped the sleep paralysis, she was still there, not as dim as mist, not as blurred as smoke. Clearly, less than an arm's length away from me. Her skin was pale, ashen like a corpse that had been soaked for a long time. Her wrinkled dress was soaked, dripping water onto the wooden floor. Drip, 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 like the hands of a dead clock. Her eyes were lifeless, black as ink, deep as a bottomless pit. And for a few seconds, I had the feeling she wasn't just looking at me, she was looking through me, as if I wasn't the only one there. I opened my mouth to scream, but she raised her head, then slowly raised her hand, pointing at my brother sitting in front of the computer screen. I turned. My brother was asleep on the table. His face was down on the keyboard, his hands clenched into cramped fists. I rushed to shake him, called his name, shaking his shoulders. No response. I turned on the light, called my parents. They rushed in a panic. My mother held the boy, and I stood back trembling, still staring at the corner of the bed where she had been standing. Empty. Only a few wet footprints remained on the floor, fading as if blown away by the wind. My brother woke up a few minutes later. He was panting, sweating, his eyes panicked. I asked him if he was okay. He shook his head, then whispered something I will never forget. You weren't sleeping. I saw you stand up, then squat down right at the head of my bed and cry. I was speechless. I didn't remember getting out of bed. I didn't remember crying either. But the boy insisted that I had, that he saw me clearly with my black, whiteless eyes. From that night on, that woman no longer came only in my dreams. She appeared in the mirror behind me when I brushed my teeth. She appeared in the bus window, reflecting her eyeless eyes when it rained. And once, when I passed a second-hand shop, I saw a damp gray dress hanging in a dark corner, hanging there as if waiting for someone to put it on. I started taking notes. Every time she appeared, every dream, every sleep paralysis, I began to realize she wasn't going anywhere. It was just, she was slowly getting closer. The nightmares came again and again. It was always the same scene. I was sitting alone in the living room. Outside the window was a pitch-black night. No streetlights, no moon or stars. There were no more lights in the apartment. Only the dim light from the kitchen like a dying candle. And I heard the sound of bare feet. From the kitchen, each step was slow, steady, not hurried. The footsteps were light as if gliding, but they penetrated my brain, like stepping on my skin. I couldn't turn my head. I could only feel that presence approaching, step by step. I couldn't see anyone, but I knew clearly someone was standing behind me, breathing on the back of my neck. A cold, long breath, smelling of rusty iron. Then a hand was placed on my shoulder. My arms were long and thin, with bones sticking out like animal claws. I screamed in my dream and woke up in a cold sweat. But the nightmare repeated itself the next night, and the night after that. I told my mother. She just laughed and said, because I was lying near the kitchen door, it was so cold that I had strange dreams. My mother didn't know. No one knew. Only I knew that the apartment never had sunlight, even though it faced east, had large windows, and no buildings in front of it. Every morning, the light only stopped on the balcony. It never penetrated deep inside. The living room was always gray and damp, as if covered with a layer of nameless ash. A few weeks later, I changed my sleeping place. I went upstairs, sharing a room with my parents. But every night, I heard the sound of chairs being pulled out from the living room, as if someone was sitting, waiting. One day, I decided to try pointing my phone camera toward the stairs to see who or what was walking around at night. The next morning, I checked the footage. The video started at 2:03 a.m. The first minute was quiet. The second minute, the sofa moved a few inches, as if someone had just sat down. The third minute, a white shadow passed by the bottom of the stairs. Blurry, but clearly defined, a thin woman with long hair covering her face. And finally, 2:07, the camera faded, then froze on a frame, a pair of black eyes, without whites, staring straight into the lens. I deleted the video. I told my parents that my phone had a virus and couldn't record anything. But after that night, I never slept downstairs alone again. Even though the apartment was spacious, comfortable, newly built, to me, it had no sun, no human breath, no life. There was only one thing that was always there, waiting for me to come down, waiting for me to sit on that sofa. And I knew if one day I happened to fall asleep downstairs again, it wouldn't just stand behind me. It would sit down and whisper in my ear. Again, the gray-green smoke and the black candle curled up as if it had its own soul. It didn't dissipate into the air. It didn't fly straight like normal smoke. It slithered like a snake along the base of the wall, then crawled back up the wall where we had smelled that stench. The shaman closed her eyes, her mouth muttering something in a strange language, not Vietnamese, not Latin. The tone seemed to tear the air in the apartment apart. Then suddenly, the candle went out. The room fell into absolute silence. The shaman opened her eyes, her face pale. Her trembling hands grabbed my mother's hand. It's not a ghost. It's not a dead person. This thing has never been alive and never left this place. We stood there, stunned. My stepfather asked, his voice as tense as a string, "So what is it?" She didn't answer right away. She just slowly turned her head to look at the wall, then whispered, "One eye, one mouth, one breath. It doesn't need a shape. It just needs a door to look out." That night, my baby brother stopped crying. For the first time in days and nights of struggling, he lay still, too still, in his crib. My mother was happy, but I wasn't. I looked into his eyes, and something wasn't right. The eyes of a baby less than a month old shouldn't be so empty. A few days later, when I was home alone, I decided to try the video again. This time, I placed the camera in front of the wall that smelled of death. Night view, no lights. Just the sound of the wind whistling outside the glass door and the hopeless ticking of the clock. At 2:33 a.m., a sharp intake of breath echoed through the video. Then an eye slowly appeared right in the middle of the painted wall, where solid concrete should have been. Not a human eye, no eyelids, no whites, just a black hole, deep panting, as if opening to see. I turned off the video immediately and deleted it. I didn't dare tell anyone. All I knew was that from that day on, I avoided walking past the living room at night. And I noticed something. Every time the light dimmed, every time the darkness drew closer to the edge of the sofa, the thing opened its eyes and waited. A soft cry sounded right next to me. Soft, very soft. Not exactly a sob, but like someone trying to hold back a sob, intermittent, choking. I held my breath. At first, I thought it might be a female colleague who was having a hard time. I leaned closer to the partition, intending to ask, when the crying suddenly stopped. Silence. Then the sound of nails tapping. Knock, knock, knock. Not on the floor, but on the partition right next to my face. Exactly opposite the position my face was pressed against. Startled, I pushed the door open and walked out. The light was still flickering. The air was cold, but the outer door was still closed. No one else was in the room. I went to the mirror to wash my hands, trying to calm myself. The reflection of the light made my face pale like a corpse. Just then, the door to the bathroom next door slowly opened. I turned around. No one. I walked closer and pushed the door open. The room was empty, but there were long scratches on the white tile walls, reddish-brown like dried blood, running from the high edge of the wall near the ceiling to the floor, as if someone had tried to climb up and then been pulled down. I ran out of the break room, my heart pounding. When I got back to the switchboard, I told the shift leader. She looked at me, her face serious, and said only one sentence. You went into the executive break room? We should have sealed it off last year. I was speechless. Someone died there, she continued more quietly. A new employee on the night shift. No one noticed because there were few people on that shift. The next morning, they found her hanging in the last bathroom stall, the one you just entered. I didn't go to the next shift, but the nights after that, I still heard the crying, even in my sleep. And what scared me the most was the nightmare that night. I wasn't in my house. I was in the back stall, the light flickering above me, my face reflected in the water on the floor. And someone was knocking on the partition. From outside, her face pressed against the back of my neck. It wasn't a reflection of me. It wasn't an illusion. Her long hair covered her face, hanging like seaweed underwater. Her shoulders were thin. Her uniform was faded. Her skin was as pale as someone who had been soaking in the bath for too long. I couldn't breathe. My throat tightened. But the most terrifying thing, it wasn't the image. It was the whisper right next to my ear, even though I could see her mouth not moving. Are you also on the night shift? I turned around in panic. There was no one there, but my hand, still on the sink, was wet, even though I hadn't turned on the faucet there. The stench of wet human hair was overwhelming. I rushed out, running like I had never run before. From then on, I never looked in the mirror in that bathroom again. Never. Later, in a rare staff meeting in the middle of the night, I told the story to the longest-serving shift manager, a quiet man who had worked at the switchboard since it was a newspaper office during the subsidy period. He took a sip of coffee, then said, she was Fwang, the first night shift employee of the operating area. Died at that position. No one knew the reason. They only saw her fall in the bathroom, blood pouring from her ears and nose. Her face still looked like she was crying. I asked, why didn't you make an offering? Why didn't you hold a ceremony? He shook his head, his eyes looking far away. Someone once invited a shaman, but the candle didn't burn. And every time they took the mirror down, after a night, it hung back in its original place, as if she needed it, as if it was a gate connecting two worlds. From then on, I changed shifts, changed duty areas, and did everything I could to stay away from the ground floor operations area. But every time I passed by, I still had the feeling that someone was watching me from the mirror, not looking, but watching. Watch for, find a replacement. I stood frozen in front of the old newspaper. It couldn't be that man with the broken head to one side. It was a figure I saw in my dream, where he collapsed, eyes rolled back, hands clutching his chest. And he died right at the foundation of the house I was living in. I began to feel nothing was a coincidence anymore. The apartment without sunlight, the woman in the shadow, the girl in the bathroom mirror, the child in room 20, and now Harold Griggs. All of them. There seemed to be an invisible connection. Perhaps I was not just a victim of a separate story, but the last link in a chain of curses that had lasted for many generations. That night, when the whole family slept at the local hotel, I couldn't sleep. I sat in front of my laptop, typing in keywords I had previously avoided. Harold Griggs death plus Curseland. Mysterious deaths connected to mirror apparitions. Room 20 haunted hotel girl. The fourth page of an old forum popped up. A short post titled, The Girl in the Walls, Ko Gai Trong Fong Jia. The content of the post described recurring phenomena across the United States, Canada, and Eastern Europe. An unidentified female spirit, constantly possessing places associated with reflections, mirrors, glass, water surfaces, cameras. Wherever she appeared, someone would die afterward. But even stranger, the victims were connected by an ancient bloodline. A chill ran down my spine. At that moment, a text message came from my best friend, who had warned me about the girl in the mirror. The message simply read, Dren, have you ever wondered why all this is following you? I typed back, you know something, right? She didn't reply, just sent a photo. A faded old black and white photo of a woman in a long dress, holding a newborn baby in front of an old wooden door. Beneath it was written, Isabel Griggs, Chicago, 1920. And on the back of the photo, handwritten in red ink, the words, My blood still flows through you. I'm not done. I have to finish. That sentence kept playing in my head, night after night, like a ghostly song on repeat. I became obsessed. I started to research Harold Griggs. But the strange thing was, other than that old article, there was no reference to him, no hospital records, no death certificate, no relatives, no farewells. It was as if he had never existed. One afternoon, I decided to return to the old house where Harold had lived, now abandoned, shrouded in weeds and darkness. I climbed over the rotten wooden fence and stepped inside. The space was cold and dense, as if filled with the breath of souls who had not yet been released. In the corner of the living room, I found a small wooden box hidden under an old carpet. Inside, there was only a single leather notebook, yellow by time. I opened it. The first pages were Harold's diary. He wrote about being hired to rebuild house number 87 after a fire in 1952. But about halfway through the book, the handwriting began to shake. The words became distorted, repeating themselves in a chaotic manner. There's someone in the wall. I heard a voice calling from the bricks. A girl. She had no eyes. Every night, she whispered, Save me, save me. I had to open that wall, but they wouldn't let me. They said I was crazy. They locked me up. With trembling hands, I turned to the last page, a page torn apart, with only one line scrawled in red pen. If you read this, then I'm not done yet. That night, I dreamed that I was locked up in that house, but in 1954, everything was intact. I saw Harold shaking with a hammer in his hand, pounding on the wall next to the stairs. He shouted, She's here. She's alive. You killed her. I tried to run to stop him, but when I touched his hand, he turned to look at me. His eyes were no longer cloudy, but clear as if he were awake. He said, Now it's your turn. You must do what I couldn't. I woke up with my hands covered in cement dust, though I hadn't left my bed that night. I knew I had to go back to number 87. I had to break down the wall. I had to find that eyeless girl. And if her soul was still trapped, I would free her. Even if that meant I had to face what had been buried with her nearly 70 years ago. I woke City up, pressing. What did you dream about? Tell me the details, please. City was still half asleep, but his face was pale. He pushed himself up, his forehead covered in sweat. His voice was trembling. I saw the church. A curved roof, stained glass. Then someone stepped out from behind the altar. A nun. Her face was as white as paper. Her eyes had no pupils, just two black holes. But she spoke clearly. You are the final key. Open it, and I will complete the unfinished ritual. My heart was pounding. What else did she say? City touched his neck, as if he still felt someone strangling him. Then he lifted the black cardboard that was lying on the floor. I froze. There were strange symbols on it, like ancient runes or codes scribbled in white chalk. They curved, intersected, forming the shape of a hand clutching a broken cross. I immediately searched Harold's notebook for photos. On the last page, in a smear of red ink, There was an identical drawing, a hand clutching a broken cross, with the words below, "She did not die in the fire. She became part of it." City couldn't remember what he'd written. He didn't believe he could draw like that, and with his left hand, too. I started to connect the dots. Harold Griggs saw an eyeless girl buried in a wall. I saw the woman with the torn mouth reflected in mirrors in many places. City saw the missing nun by the burning church window, and all whispered the same thought. Something was unfinished. An entity had been sealed, maybe through the mirrors, maybe through the concrete wall, maybe through the stained glass of the church. Each of us, me, City, even Harold, was a piece of that final ritual. That night, I dreamed that I was standing in the burning church. Ashes covered the floor, and the nun was right there on the pulpit. But this time, she said nothing, just looked at me. Then she turned and walked toward the large mirror behind the organ. She reached out and touched the surface. The mirror began to flow like water. Inside were countless figures imprisoned, faceless souls, mouths wide open as if screaming in silence. Then she turned her head, her eyes as black as the bottom of an abyss. Just one nod and you will see. I woke up, my hand raised as if about to touch the laptop screen. I looked at my friend, my throat dry. "That door should always be locked, right?" She nodded. Her eyes were wide, unblinking. There was no light, no sound, but a cold draft came from the crack in the door. The smell was strong with chlorine and something old, like rotten books, human skin, and rust. I touched the door. My hands shook as I pushed it open. The stairs leading down to the basement were pitch black, the steps cold concrete. We had only a small flashlight from our phones. The flickering light, not enough to illuminate the entire path. As I reached the fourth step, I heard something. A laugh. Very small, dry, like coming from someone's throat, choked. My friend stopped short. "Is someone in there?" I swallowed. I think, it's not who, it's what. Down in the basement was a long, dark hallway, tiled with yellowish-brown tiles. There were black handprints on the walls, as if they had been burned. And then, at the end of the hallway, was a large metal door, no sign, no lock, no bell. But there was a dented handprint imprinted in the old paint, as if someone had tried to scratch it from the inside. We approached. As soon as my hand touched the handle, the flashlight went out. The basement was plunged into darkness. After that, we don't really remember what happened. We woke up on the floor of the isolation room. The door was closed as if it had never been opened. The doctor and the guard both said we had passed out from lack of oxygen. But in my hand was something I had never brought, a bloody piece of linen on which were sewn faded letters. "The last door is not opened. It only sleeps when no one remembers." My friend quit that night. I couldn't, because that night my phone was still recording. And in the final clip, there was a frame 2 seconds before the lights went out. In the flickering light of the flashlight, there was a person standing in the middle of the hallway. No eyes, no mouth. His entire body was covered in bloody bandages, and his hands were tied with medical tape. He didn't move. He just stood there, tilting his head to look at the camera. I stepped into the elevator at the end of the hallway. The cold stainless steel box pressed against my hand. There was no button for floor B5, but when the door closed, the light on the control panel suddenly blinked, and then there was a ding sound. The elevator slid down automatically, deeper than the basement I had ever known. The door opened, a long, dark hallway, with flickering yellow lights that seemed to be dying. The air here was thick with the smell of old antiseptic mixed with the fishy smell of coagulated blood. Along both sides were rooms with frosted glass doors. Inside were blurry shadows like human bodies lying motionless. I swallowed, walked the room with a handwritten sign. Room B5, organ transplantation and preservation. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered on and off. There were 3 stainless steel beds in the middle of the room, all with human figures lying on them covered with white sheets. In the corner of the room was an industrial refrigerator, where I guess the heart was stored. I put the stainless steel box on the table, about to turn around when the sheet on the middle bed moved. I was stunned. I couldn't take my eyes off it. The cloth slowly slid down, revealing a man's face, but his face was covered in surgical scars, and in the middle of his chest was a hollow, heartless hole. His eyes opened, and I heard in my head, not with my ears, "Take my heart back." I can still hear it beating. I fell back, trying to back away. Then the stainless steel box started making noises, as if something was tapping on the lid from inside. Crack, crack. I stared. My heart was pounding. Sweat was pouring out. The lid popped open. There was more than just a heart inside. There were 10 human eyes, soaked in liquid, still blinking, and a heart, still beating slowly, heavily, as if it were alive in the darkness. I ran away, leaving everything behind. But in the elevator, the reflection in the mirror was no longer me. It was someone in a white blouse, wearing a mask, and on his chest was a long, unhealed stitch. That person looked at me, and his mouth moved. B5 never is over. From that day on, I never went back to the hospital again. But every time I slept, I could hear my heart beating steadily right next to my ear. And every morning, I woke up with blood on my hands. Last diary to the next. I don't remember when I passed out. I only remember the next morning. I woke up with a circular bruise right in the middle of my chest, right in the middle of my sternum. It didn't hurt, but my heart was beating irregularly, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, as if someone else was controlling it. I went to the doctor. All the indicators were normal. No signs of surgical intervention. No strange drugs in my blood. The doctor said I was extremely anxious, but I knew the thing in my chest was no longer my heart. Day 3 to 2:41 a.m. I dreamed that I was taken back to floor B5, but this time no one forced me. I walked down by myself. I lay down on the operating table by myself, and then the children came out of the darkness one by one. The boy with the hollow chest stood closest. He spoke, in a voice that was a mixture of 10 different whispers. "You are the last one. The 10th heart has been placed. Now, B5 can open completely." I screamed in my dream, but when I woke up, I saw a small bloodstain on my pillow, and on the wall of my room, someone had written with a fingernail in scribbles, "They will come one by one, carrying the stolen heartbeat." Day 5 to 3 a.m. I heard a boom, boom, boom coming from the floor. It was not my heart. It was a sound of 10 different hearts, beating out of rhythm, banging against each other as if angry at being woken up. I looked in the mirror. There was a stitch on my back. Long, thin, still bleeding. I turned around, nothing. I turned around again. My mouth was grinning from ear to ear, but my eyes were empty. Day 7. Finally understanding. I found the hospital blueprints in the city library. Floor B5 wasn't on any of the plans, but an old scan in Latin had a caption underneath the architectural section. The 5th floor, Locus Tenebrarum Cordis, where the darkness resides in the heart. The 5th floor, the darkness of the heart. The last night before I disappear. I leave this diary for whoever finds it. If you read it, please leave this place. Never take an organ transfer mission. Never trust an elevator with no buttons. And never look in the mirror after 3 a.m. Because if you find yourself on the operating table, it's too late. My hand was shaking as I read this, my stomach churning. The pictures didn't just make me sick. They looked back at me. In the last photo, the creature, it had no eyes, but I knew it was sensing me. It was as if every time someone looked at it, it would look back from the other side. The next morning news. St. Loretta Hospital denied the existence of Level 5 after an unknown video went viral on social media, showing what appeared to be an illegal organ transplant facility. The video was taken down within 17 minutes. The person who posted it, a nurse intern, is now missing. I watched the news with a racing heart because it was a video I had taken, but had never shared with anyone. Who posted it? The last message from the anonymous number. Level 5 is closed, but the seed has been planted in you. Be careful when you sleep. I deleted the message, but that night, I didn't dream at all. I just woke up with a new stitch on my left side. I wasn't myself anymore. Slowly, I noticed small changes. I didn't need sleep, but I was still awake. My wounds healed in just a few hours. And sometimes, I could hear other people's heartbeats from a few meters away. I began to see things that others couldn't see. Creatures crawling across the hospital ceiling. A young nurse suddenly burst into tears in the elevator when she saw my eyes change color. I no longer felt the same emotions. Only my memories were getting sharper. But there were memories that weren't mine, as if I were living another life nested inside me. Room 60, the final truth. I decided to go back. Not to investigate, but to finish. Despite the warning, I still found my way back down to basement, following the old technical pipes that led to room 60. When I opened the door, the smell of blood and iron, and the cold air wafted out like a waiting trap. In the middle of the room was an old stainless steel box. The lid was open. It was empty inside. On the wall, written in dried viscera, "She is complete. We are one. Thanks to the heart." Closing. If anyone finds this diary, please burn it, or bury it deep in the cold ground, because I am no longer me. I am part of Project 7, and your heart is beating very loudly. Additional notes, confidential. Subject 60A. Role: biological digestion and metabolism of cellular restructuring. Status: inactive. Harmless unless stimulated. Warnings: no direct contact. Do not place next to objects with child DNA. Do not reflect in mirrors. Additional notes: his eyes are open, though they are lidless, and he sees through. Final file: the anesthesiologist has disappeared as if he had never existed. No one in the hospital remembers his name, except me, but I cannot say it, because I know every time I write about it is something that begins to move in the darkness. Then that day, the package. No name, no address. Inside is a bloody mask and a small note. Its eyes are looking at her. If she tells more, she will become the next implant. I understand. Floor B5, Room 60, and Project 7 are not just places. They are portals. Portals to a place deeper and darker than death. The other part, Sue's friend. My story can be erased from the record, but Sue's story is not. Sue is my niece, a bright, innocent child, until she started talking to herself. It all started with a light blue dress. Not Sue's, and no one in the family had ever bought it. But Sue held it like a treasure and said, "I'm wearing a dress for Jessica. She's cold." The closet where Sue's sitting unable to open it. But that night, it did. And the next morning, the dress was back, soaked, cold as if it had been soaked from the ground. A few days later, Sue's stepfather found a note stuffed under the pillow, scribbled in faded blue crayon. "I don't want to go. I'm cold. I miss Sue. Jessica." When asked, Sue just lowered her head. "I don't know, but he told me not to say." What is the end of this story? My sister decided to go back to the old house, hoping to find a landlord to ask about Jessica, but he had died last year of heart disease. Only the neighbor told he had a niece named Jessica, drowned in the water tank at the age of 6. Since then, no one dared to mention that name in that house anymore. She went to the cemetery. At the end of the field, under a large banyan tree, there was a small grave without a headstone, only a piece of rotten wood with a scribble scribbled, "Jessica, 6 years old," and the words below, written in a pale, almost faded marker, "I will play with you forever, Sue." From then on, no one in the family mentioned the name Jessica anymore. Little Sue grew up normally and gradually forgot. But one thing remained unchanged. Every night, before going to bed, Sue still opened the wardrobe door a little as if to make room for someone. Once my sister asked, "Why didn't you close the wardrobe like Mom told you?" Sue just smiled lightly, because if you locked it, Jessica would be sad. Although time has passed, I still can't forget her clear eyes when she talked about the friend that no one had ever seen. As an adult, I believe in logic and science. But deep in my mind, there is still something that makes me shiver every time I think about it. Jessica could just be an imaginary game, or a little soul still looking for someone to play with. The story may be over, but the darkness never sleeps. If you accidentally hear footsteps in the night or see the same name in the mirror, don't worry. It's just someone wants you back. Goodbye and see you in the next video.